My name is Monk Rowe, and we're at the Hotel Utica. I'm speaking with drummer and band leader Winnard Harper. Welcome to Utica.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
First time in Utica?
You know, it might be.
Yeah.
It might be.
Well, at home I have the 3-volume Grove Encyclopedia of Jazz, and I looked you up, and
I'm in there.
You are in there, and you have a photo too.
Get out.
You do. And not everybody gets a photo. So, congratulations on your career so far.
Oh, thank you.
If you went to a party and people questioned you about making a career in jazz, you say, well, what's that like, trying to be a jazz musician? Do you have an answer for them?
Wow, that's a big and deep question, because I think when I was coming along, and as a young man coming out, you know, out of school and stuff, it was different than what it is today. So that's almost like two totally different worlds. I think at that age, for a lot of us coming out of school, let's say in the 80s, you know, it was different. It seemed to be more opportunities, you know, and a lot of hope. Now it's a little tougher.
Well, what were the opportunities that were there before that aren't here now?
Well, I think first off, there were more venues, there were more places to play. When we came along, I could at least say maybe in almost every major city, there was at least one club or place that you could hope to play and work. It's not quite that way today. And then on top of that, with a lot of us that came along, let's say late 70s, 80s, there were some bands you could play in. You could go apprentice with somebody. You know, Art Blakey was still around, Betty Carter, Horace Silver had a band, Sonny Rollins. I mean, that's just, you know, off the top of my head, a few of the bands. And now, it's not enough work for a lot of guys to even keep a regular working band.
To keep the same group of people together, and you did that.
Yeah, I'm still trying to do that. That's what I'm saying. That's how I know I get beat up bad. But when we came along, the first band I played in with Betty Carter, me and Benny Green, that was a band we could sit in and work, rehearse, go out on the road, and I did it for 4 years. I think most of us pretty much, you know, had like a 4-year run with her. And same thing with a lot of guys who work with Art Blakey in the Jazz Message. It's just a place you could go sit and, you know, hone your craft, learn for about 3 or 4 years.
That was like your college.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So why is it, well, I guess it's an obvious thing here, why can't that happen now? Like Javon Jackson and you and other people in that generation, it's just harder to keep a group.
It is harder, and it's not enough places to play there again.
Mm-hmm.
Then nowadays, when I look at trying to book gigs and book tours, and it's not just me, this is, you know, from talking with other guys, it's like it was a time you could go out and say, okay, well, I'm going to play this place for a week. I know I'm here Tuesday through Sunday. If I get lucky, maybe I can find something on a Monday. You know what I mean? And in most of the cities, you could go, you play that jazz venue for a week. Now, a lot of times, if these cities have jazz venues, doing a week nowadays is you don't even see that often. Sometimes not even New York. New York is kind of, you know, come back. The Vanguard, you still may see a week. Very few places do you see that Tuesday through Sunday, you know, anymore. So it's a lot harder. So as a band leader, when you try to take a band out, nowadays, I mean, most places will want to hire you for the weekend. Then you got to try to figure out, what am I doing Monday through Thursday? Am I sitting around paying a hotel bill, or am I going to pay to send everybody back and come back again? So it gets a lot tougher. It says, you know, you have to try to find, okay, how can I fill up the week and not have so many off days? Because off days, obviously you're paying hotels or whatnot. So it's just a lot tougher. It's less places to play, and a lot of that's because more steps need to be made to replenish the jazz audience.
It's ironic because jazz, like in academia now, is flourishing.
Right.
Every college, and at least has some jazz presence, and also you can major in jazz and so forth. It doesn't translate to the club scene.
No, because some great steps and pioneers put work in on jazz education. The guy I worked with for 15 years old, Dr. Billy Taylor, Joe Newman, guys like Nathan Davis, some of those pioneers, fought for and helped put, jazz education in place where now most of your major colleges have jazz programs, which at one time, even when I came out of high school, that was rare. A lot of schools didn't have jazz, programs. But now all of these schools have jazz programs. So we've done a lot to bring along musicians, but we haven't done enough to bring along people for them to play for.
Right.
So that's where we have to come up now with some thought and some ways of building and replenishing, the jazz audience, getting some people to say, look, this is something worthwhile. This is something that we need to have our young people check out. We need to have them grow with.
And how do you do that? You have any ideas?
It's like anything. It's going to be more than one thing that gets it taken care of. I think one thing is that in the educational system, we have to start early though. We can't wait to introducing people to it. By the time they're 18 and 19, we need to start early. We need to put some programs in, the elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, where we can play for the kids and show them, give them some of the history. Show them that it is. Not only is it a great, powerful music, but it's also fun. It's uplifting. Some other things have to be done with it, because there was a time when most of the TV themes were jazz based. Now all of that, so very rare. For most kids growing up, they're lucky if they hear anything.
It's funny you mention that, because a lot of the TV themes now, I'll challenge somebody. Whistle the theme from Law and Order. They're not. They're sounds almost. Some of them,
Right.
Don't
bang.
I mean, that's cool. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's not like Peter Gunn and those.
Oh yeah, it's not like remember hearing "I Dream of Jeannie."
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? Or Mission Impossible.
Right.
Or even Star Trek. Because Star Trek, that thing's kind of based out of nowhere. So.
I never thought of that.
You think about the Flintstones, which doesn't come on anymore.
Right.
So you had a lot of shows that, that was jazz based. Even, and the music had some content. Think about Hawaii Five-0,
If you had a little audience and you were trying to get them turned on to jazz, and like you had an hour or something, you had a CD player, what kind of recordings would you pick from jazz history?
Probably I would try to squeeze in as much. Be a lot of variety. It would probably be definitely some Louis Armstrong, some Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, of course, and then probably get to some Art Blakey, the Jazz Messengers. Cannonball. I mean, it would be so much. I would try to pack in. I would try to pick a lot of those things that I think brought me along. That it turned me on to the music. Clifford Brown and Max Roach. But singers I think is always a good way of coming in. Excuse me for a moment.
Sure. Well, you said a magic word just now, Cannonball.
Oh yeah.
Man, he still is. He's like it. He had everything that a saxophone player could, or anybody could.
Everything, and a great band. It was the first band I had, my brother and myself, the Harper Brothers. Of course, me being a drummer, everybody thought more and patterned us after Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. But the band that I was turned on by was Cannonball Band.
With Roy McCurdy or with Louis
the first,
Hayes?
Louis Hayes, Sam Jones.
Yes.
But I
Okay.
love, I mean, Roy McCurry is a good friend. I love that band too.
Yeah.
But all of the bands were good. But it's just the way the Cannonball played, the way they approached the music. Everything, I mean, the dance was in the music. That's the key. The dance, when you heard Cannonball, I mean, it would get you dancing. The dance, you know, was in the music. And everything they played sounded fun. You know, it reached you. It, you know, it hit you in the soul. And it was funny because one of the bands I had later on, I remember having, I had George Cables play with me for quite some time. You know, we would talk and tell stories, be on the road, driving, and he was telling us a story one time about him getting called, you know, to make a rehearsal with Cannonball. And at the time, I think he thought, well, wow, you know, I'm making this rehearsal, I'm going to be making the gig. But it was just, you know, having him, you know, set up for the rehearsal. But he was telling us that, you know, when he played rehearsal, you know, and I guess they all got there before Cannonball did, you know, and they playing. He said when Cannon came in, Cannon started playing, he was like, oh, shucks. You know, he said, you know, his sound was so big and he swung so hard. George said one thing he remembered, he says, man, you don't even need a band. You know, because, you know, and that's the way Cannon played. The stuff just, you know, swung so hard.
He did. He played like he was. I mean, he just played with his personality almost.
Right.
He just was so erudite, and it was great. Great stuff. What did you learn from people like Betty Carter and Dexter Gordon and that generation? Anything that you can pass on?
A lot of everything. A lot of music, but probably more life than anything. Because one thing about Betty that I always admired was her strength, and she was tenacious. You know, she was going to find a way to get it done, and we missed that. And yeah, I think the music misses that. You know, those kind of people like that. Betty, you know, she would think through ways, and if a door was closed, she was going to open up something somewhere else. Because I remember many times, like, just asking her questions all the time, and she had ways of, okay, well, if this club is not going to hire me, well, I don't like that club, then I'm going to do this. We'll go in here and we'll play this city, but we'll play here. You know, even sometimes too, you know, she would, you know, she would rent out a theater or space and go in there and she put herself, you know, in concert. So I really admired that, and it helped me a lot, you know, when I started the Harper Brothers, you know. So business-wise, I learned a lot from Betty and their strength and just how to keep a band and how to try to get what you want from everybody, keep everybody, you know, on the same page and playing the music.
Was she tough with her accompanists?
Sure. But it was I always looked at it like a boot camp. You know what I mean? You know, if you come in there and you can get through this, then you're ready for any and everything. And then when I looked at the history of it, come to find that a lot of the guys that played with her, when they came out into the scene, when they got from beyond her, they could handle just about anything you threw at them. And I think a lot of the other guys around knew that. Well, this guy played with Betty, so I know he's going to be sound. He knows he's going to know a lot of tunes, you know. So those things came with the territory. So I kind of felt like if you can get through that, you know, you can make it and you can do it well, and you've graduated. So she was tough, but in a good way, as long as you looked at it, you know, the right way. You know, you had to see light at the end of the tunnel.
When you do your, not sure how to say this question. When you do your taxes at the end of the year, and you look where your income comes from, how much of it is from live gigs, and how much is it from other things like teaching or workshops?
For me, and I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, it's still pretty much live. There's still a bulk of, I'm still at, you know, because of the way I came up with the people I came up with, I'm still a diehard, you know, in terms of that. I'm going to try to make it, you know, almost like Betty, I'm going to try to make a gig some kind of way, even if I have to create one. because I feel like getting the music and getting it live is the best thing. And I'm on this mission too of trying to replenish the jazz audience. So I'm trying to take the music into places that people may not normally get it. Trying to take it to some of the, some of the children in schools. The past couple of years in Jersey City, I've had a program where I would go into a lot of different public, schools,
Yeah.
and play the music for the kids. Have a little neighborhood place that I use in Jersey City where I have a jam session on Fridays, and once a month, beginning of the month, I have a little jazz concert. So I'm still always, trying to make it, because I feel like it's the best way to get the music. And especially for people that are experiencing music for the first time. Because the recordings are great too, but we live in such a visual age now, with everything, with them, being able to see videos and whatnot. I think for them to be able to see and get the whole experience is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a very YouTube world,
Right.
And being able to talk intelligently with an audience is important too. Like the whole idea of a jazz musician just not communicating with their voice too, I think, doesn't help the music.
Yeah, being able to talk, you get close, the intimacy of it. And a lot of times, I think for people that don't know, when they first hear that term, well, this is jazz music, everybody thinks, it's going to be, boring, it's, going to be so intellectual, or, I don't understand it, what are they playing, what are they doing? So sometimes to experience it live and to see people having fun, to see people interacting, I think counteracts all of that.
Yeah. That phrase like, well, after they're done playing the melody, I just don't get it anymore. Like,
Right.
What are they doing?
Yeah, that happens.
Oh man! And you got into the balafone over the years.
Right.
What prompted that?
Different work experiences. I spent a little time with Jackie McLean. It's kind of really how it all started. I spent some time with Jackie McLean back in, I guess, the very early 80s. When I first came out of D.C., Jackie brought my brother and I up to the University of Hartford. We went to school there for a minute. So Jackie, I took a history class with him, and where we studied a lot of the, some of the African music, the roots of jazz and stuff like that. So it got me into thinking about a lot of the African traditions. Then when I got to New York and I started, I worked with Betty, and then in the meantime of working with Betty, I also started doing some gigs with Abdullah Ibrahim. So there, now I'm getting some of the South African flavor, and then playing with some of the other great African musicians that he knew. At the same time, a little before that, I had met and become very, very good friends with Billy Higgins. We had become like really close, where we would, share music. If he came to New York, he'd come over to my house, and come in, we'd play drums and play stuff. I'd go to L.A., he'd come get me, go to his house, we'd play, and he would start showing me some of the different instruments that he played, because Billy could pick up a little bit of everything and play, guitar and stuff. And so the first thing he had shown me was this little box we call a slit drum. It's like a wooden box. You've seen them. They had to get slabs cut up on the top, where they get different notes. So he showed me one of those, and I liked that. Started playing. I said, oh, yeah. So when you check out some of my first recordings, that's what I'm using. It's a slit drum. And then it just got me to being curious. And every time I would get to these different cities, I'd go to the music stores, or I go, I'd be playing on a festival or something. It'd be a African festival, so I'd go down and check out some of the instruments. And one day I found a little balafone, a small balafone, and I started playing this. I said, well, you know what? This would be even easier to carry than a slit drum, and I like the sound of it, so I started messing around with balaphones. And that's how that came in.
And does it inspire composition?
Sure. I mean, just because the sound of them, it's being the way that they're made and from different tribes in different parts of Africa, all of them are different. So, I mean, if you come by my house, I've got like almost 10 or 15 of my, I get them and kind of collect them because I'll play them for a while and it sound and different melodies come out of different ones for me. So I have several of them, you know, because the tonal system and the scales that they use, and they're never the same. You know.
Yeah, they just had a fellow at Hamilton last week who had the Mbira.
Right.
He basically was saying the same thing. The scale and intonation can actually vary from one village to the next, apparently.
Right. It's different.
Yeah.
Which is really, really nice and slick in itself. You know, it gives it, you know, everything has identity. You know, and I guess for a lot of them, they hear them and they can tell. Okay, I know that sound. I know where that's. That's right. But it's the same way with the music, which is interesting too, because even with the drummers, that's why with a lot of my students, I tell them they have to go, because I got it from Jackie, they have to go study the history of this music. If you really want to play this music and play it well and with best intentions, you have to do you study of jazz history. And you can't do that without starting, you know, in Africa. Because for them, when they play those drums, it's a language. They're talking. Those guys that sit down, they're playing stuff, and people that know will hear them, and they know what they're saying. You know what I mean? So it's a very, very interesting, because as you know, like from checking out some of my CDs, I've used a lot of different African drummers over the years. And I have one of the last guys I used, Alioune Faye, his whole family plays. And there have been times we get to different cities where some of his family is living, and they'll come and sit in. You know, we'll be doing workshops, and I let them play, and they'll break it down. They'll tell us, well, if he plays this, I know he's calling me. That's my name. So it's really slick and interesting. You know.
It's my daughter actually plays in an African drum ensemble in Rochester, and I go to see them. It's led by a fellow from West Africa, and it would annoy me. The music was incredible, but I would get annoyed when I couldn't put, where's one? You know, I'd lose it. And I don't think I should be annoyed, but I kept trying to, like, codify it into something I could feel like I understood, I suppose.
Yeah, well, for them it's there, you know. It's just like, you know, they have whatever the clave is, it gets held down. And, you know, because there's one of those instruments, usually with the ensemble, one of those instruments is holding everything down. You know, where you can base, okay, you lock on that. But then all of the polyrhythms go on top, you know, and that's what, you know, you start hearing all those other voices. But there's something, you know, nailing, holding it down. But it's so interesting. And that's what jazz, you know, how jazz evolved out of that. Jazz is still a language. You know, it's speaking. It should be saying something. And that's some of, you know, sometimes my problem with some of the stuff that comes out today. Sometimes I don't think people think about that, and they're not really trying to say anything. When you go back and you listen to Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, you know, even guys we talked about, Harry Sweets Edison, you know, Frank West, they were saying something. You know, there was some intent. It wasn't just I'm just gonna get up here and have a good time. You know, it was that. It was a part of that, but there was still some other very meaningful.
It's interesting how technology has affected things like in the days when they were making records, they were on 78s, and they had 3 minutes to do their thing right.
Right.
And it affected the way they played, I think. Because then with the LPs, I'm like, oh, I got 30 minutes on the side. I can.
Yeah, I can see that.
I want to make sure we're up. Yeah, picking up a nice vacuum cleaner here. Okay, I have a couple audio things I'd like you to comment on, if you don't mind. This is not really what Downbeat would have called a blindfold test,
right?
But nice, huh?
Yeah. I grew up on all that.
Yeah. What is it about that for you that is just so uh, gets you in the heart?
First of all, it swings. You know, it swings, and like I said, that, for me, I guess when I think about a lot of those guys in that era, uh, the intent, that they played with, for me, you can feel all of that. You can't get away, can't get away from it. Higgins,
That was
Art Blakey,
that was him.
Hula.
Yeah.
I mean,
I thought you might.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we were tight, man, because I loved his sound, and the way he played was his personality.
Some people would go, "Oh, wait a minute. What do you mean you love his sound? Like, how can you tell one drummer from another?"
What, especially in that period, and what a lot of the great players, it's just like when you would talk to some people that might be into, let's say, metaphysics and spiritual things. When they talk about everybody has an aura, a guy's sound is like his aura. Just like when you were talking about Cannonball, it's his personality. And it comes through the horns. And still, with a lot of players, you can see that their personalities, will transcend and come through, their instrument. Some of the inner things that you don't see unless you really know them well. All of that will tend to come out. I mean, like you might have some guys that you think they're just quiet, they don't say a whole lot, but then when they play, it's like, wow, that's kind of surprising. But if you got to know them, that's coming out of what's inside. You know what I mean? So I think that's a lot of what their sound and their personality is.
Does it have also the way they tune their drums, or their sort of the gear thing?
There's some aspects of that. There's some of it, but it's not totally. Because I mean, I've spent so much time going to see Higgins and letting him use my drums. You know what I mean? Or Art Blakey, or hearing those stories about Art Blakey getting to the gig. They on tour somewhere in Europe, and there was no drums. You know what I mean? But there was some cases over in the corner, so he pulled out the cases and played the cases. You know what I mean? And those guys could still, through their personality, still make the music work. I remember Higgins telling me stories about, that period when he was, life was really, kind of a struggle for him. And he had pawned his drums, and he come to the gig, and no drums, and he'd go back in the back of the Vanguard and come out with a phone book and a coat hanger, or something, and still make the gig. You know what I mean? You hear good by guys, playing a pie pan, and they could still, their sound is there.
Carl Allen told this anecdote about Billy Higgins, and he was playing in a club, and he says that he was just sort of not really doing it, and all of a sudden this hand came over and took over on the ride cymbal, and it was Billy Higgins, and he said the whole room just like
lit up. Man.
That's amazing that a person could have that kind of force without bashing.
Right, because I mean, it's, like I said, it's that inside, that intent, where you know how to get what you need, and so much that spiritual energy is coming out through you, that you're able to bring up and call forth. But I mean, you for anybody that knew Cannonball, you hear some of the same stories about Cannonball. I remember people telling me, man, Cannon's personality, even when he wasn't playing, if he walked in the room, I don't know, there was something about him. You just knew, you know, Cannon was there. Well, that's the same way with his sound. You know, so a lot of guys were like that. I mean, you know, Art Blakey, Elvin, you know, the guys, I mean, Billy Taylor, you know, he's another one. I mean, you know, when you heard him play, his sound fit his personality. You know what I mean? Genuine, you know, no frills. It's just down to earth, you know, the right thing.
Okay, let me try another one here. That's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting combination of people, like, you know, Ellington and Mingus and Max Roach.
Right.
I wouldn't have guessed that would gel.
Yeah, I would. I would. What's that, Money Jungle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would, because I think never met Duke Ellington or Mingus. Knew Max and knew Max well. Max was my, you know, really my start into the music, and he was a big help in my career. But just knowing, like I said, there again, understanding him, what he played for, his intentions and everything, his love for the music, his love for history. I could understand. I knew how, and when you hear all of those guys talk about Duke Ellington, you know, there's a deep respect. You know what I mean? So with guys like that, you know, I don't care, you know, who everybody else is, you're gonna come and you're gonna find a way. Look, we're playing with Duke Ellington. You know what I mean? You know, I mean, it's just like you figure if Louis Armstrong came along, you know. And whoever he wanted to hire, there's going to be the guy's going to find a way to, you know, going to empty my glass, you know. And we're going to sit here, we're going to get filled up, and we're going to make this work, you know. So those guys, I mean, you know, their intent and their love for the music, you would figure that's going to carry.
Yeah.
You know, Mingus, another, you know, great bassist, great composer, and you have an opportunity to work with Duke Ellington, of course, yeah, sure.
Wasn't there a story about Ellington had to let Charles Mingus go or something? He got into there's some anecdote about he got into hassle with Juan Teasel or something about.
That one I never heard.
Yeah, it's out there. It sounded like Max was playing with really thin sticks to me. That sound. Was that an assumption that I can make, or don't you really?
Never really thought about it. Could be, but I know too. You know, I could tell that, you know, the drums are tuned kind of high. You know, the way Max played. I mean, he's another one. His sound, I mean, it always came through. You know, and he's another one. You know, was a good composer. So. And he was, you know, when he played the drums, he was always composing.
His music took a political stance often, and I wonder if there was something on your website I saw where you said if everyone listened to jazz once a day, that it could make a difference in the world. And I wonder if you still feel that way.
Sure. So I think, I don't know if, I guess Max's stance could be viewed as political. I view it more as life. And that's what I mean. I think the music to them was much more important than it is for a lot of people today. And I mean some of the musicians playing it, because I think their playing it wasn't just to be playing to make music or just to make money or just because I can do it. They were still trying to say something through the music, you know. And when you heard them play, or when you go back and you listen and read some of the interviews, you know, you'll hear them talk about that, you know, through the music. They were saying something, because they came through a time which is not much different from everything that's going on in the news today. Not much different than what we're dealing with today. And they were dealing with it then, and they were trying to say through the music, look, you know, we're all human. You know, this is life. And to me, nothing says that as much as, you know, as jazz does.
Why?
So I think it's always been, it's pioneered a lot of things. It's gone into a lot of places, a lot of countries, and brought people together. It's made people respect. I think too, in terms of dealing with some of the racial issues, I think the jazz musicians and the music, without a lot of people talking about this like that, were at the forefront of a lot of that, pioneering, you know, and that hasn't even talked about. Even more so than a lot of other things that we've seen. The jazz musicians were some of the first people to go in some of these places or do some of these things, and then because of them playing the music, people had to say, wait a minute, you know, this is not no easy stuff that these guys are doing. You know, so that already debunked, you know, the myth that, you know, these people are unintelligent. You know what I mean? So for the guys to get the sound and to play the things they were playing, and then for it to be investigated, and then for them to be gracious and giving enough to say, hey, come on, I can show you. You know, and they were some of the first ones where, you know, you would go in some of those after-hour places and you see all kinds of people, white, black people, just enjoying the music, you know, and then you start seeing guys play together, and other bands saying, look, I'm going to hire this person because I like what they can do. They should be heard. You know what I mean? So the music, to me, you know, through my study and reading, was at the forefront of a lot of that. And I think it still should be.
Is there any... A number of years ago, Jazz Times came out, and the cover of it said, Race Matters. And it was a coverage of a symposium that they had had, and people like Matt Hentoff and a group of people were talking about, I guess, does race matter in jazz now? Now that was a few years ago, but I wonder, is there any racial disharmony, or is it even an issue anymore?
It's always an issue, because it's an issue socially. So it's always something that has to be worked on. It's always something that should be thought about, and not just in terms of black and white. I mean, you know, there's other issues that we're coming across now, because there's always so much. The shaitan, the devil's always on this. You know, he's 24/7. You know what I mean? He doesn't ever give up. So he's always, you know, he's always stirring up something. You know, and you know, we see it from time to time, whether it's, you know, the plight of sometimes with Jewish people having to go through, or Muslims, or somebody else that moves in the neighborhood that looks different. You know, is different, speaks different. You know, mental health. I mean, it's all kind of issues that need to be addressed. That I think, you know, somewhat the music helps with that. Music, you know, puts us all, you know, because early on for me, when I would come out and do some of these concerts and work with some of the people I work with, and you look out in the audience, and that was, for me, coming out of the South, that was some of the first time I could look out. Oh, sorry.
You were talking about the audience,
yeah,
in 24.
Some of the first jazz concerts I did, I could look out in the audience and see all kinds of different people from all kinds of walks of life sitting there, enjoying the music or getting up dancing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really, everybody not thinking about You know, no arguments, no where somebody else is from, or I'm standing next to this guy and he's this. Not a problem. You know. So, you know, in my mind, you know, and maybe some of it was just optimism and some of it was being young, but in my mind, it's like, why can't we take this and magnify it and take it everywhere?
Yeah. I wish I knew the answer to that one.
Well, the answer is I guess it's a job for all of us, you know, in all walks of life. You know, whatever you do, everybody can take it. You know, can take that fundamentals and that essence of jazz and apply it. You know, and make it. You know, because sometimes you would even hear stories about some of these bands. Like I had somebody tell me some stories about the Dugangan band. Say, well, you know, nobody in that band got along. Which I mean, I never heard. I'm gonna have to do some checking into it further. See, people say, yeah, a lot of those guys didn't like each other, which is kind of amazing because if that was the case, then that too says that look, they understood that even if that was the case, you had some problems with somebody. When they got on the bandstand, that bandstand was sacred. We're gonna take care of business. We're gonna spread the love, and this is the thread that's gonna tie us, you know, all together. So that's it's a great thing. Music is powerful. Yeah. I remember one time too. Maybe Frank West told me this story, and then I think Buddy Catlett confirmed it. You know, Buddy Catlett was one of the bass players.
Yeah.
They played with bass, and I knew Buddy Catlett well. You know, for my travels in Seattle. But I think Frank told me that one time they were out on the road, and Buddy Catlett and what you call him? Was the drummer at the time?
Gus Johnson, maybe?
No.
Oh, Sonny Payne?
Sonny. They shared a room together. And they were good buddies, but I guess they both got to drinking. And they got to arguing over something. And they said they just tore up the room. You know, they beat each other up, you know what I mean? And tore up the room, you know, got up the next morning, had to go make the gig. you know. So I mean, you know, the music overrides.
Yeah, musicians are people too. You know, that they have their foibles. It's funny, the difference that Sonny Payne made in that band too. When you did that thing with your arms, like,
right?
I remember Joe Williams talking about that. That he really lit a fire into that group. Okay, I was going to try one more thing for you here.
It's got to be an old recording.
Yeah. You remember the date?
No, I'm not even sure if I had that one in my collection.
Houston Person.
Yeah, so Houston Person with Joey DeFrancesco.
Yeah. I think it's called, might have been called Why Not? Or it might have been the Young Lions in his...
Something in his line, in his cubs or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's a long time. Who's playing guitar?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Your brother's on it.
Yeah. I got the same sound.
Yeah. Do you ever, when you're doing those 4-bar breaks, 8-bar breaks, or whatever, do you plan ahead for the next break? There was a guy, I read a quote, someone in the Washington Post reviewing you're playing with someone, and he said, wonderfully orchestrated solos.
No, I'm kind of like, because Max was such a big influence on me too. He was like, that was my entrance into jazz. So, and him and, you know, all those guys, but I mean, him and Higgins both, you know, had a big influence on me, as well as, you know, Elvin and a whole bunch of other guys, Frankie Dunlap, Billy Hart. So, when it comes to solos, I'm still trying to compose, you know, like Max, I'm trying to say something. So in my solos, if I've got a solo, I may have some ideas, you know, and I'll go forth with, and then from that something else comes. But on the trading is for me, it's always based on what the horn player plays or the piano player plays, whoever's taking the forward before me. Because I'm trying to, like they've said something, I'm either trying to continue the statement or answer the statement. You know, so sometimes rhythmically I may hear something, you know, in what they play, and I may borrow from or take that and start and go from there. Sometimes it be, but so it can be a conversation, and you be, you know, and then everybody looks up and say, "Wow, man, he hears me." You know what I mean? And then all the doors start opening up, and everybody, you know, everybody's giving and taking. You know, this is a wonderful thing, playing music. It's a way, you know, if you think about it, all those things are the fundamentals for life, because you know what it does to somebody when they realize and find out somebody hears me. You know, I've talked and he's listening. You know, that's, I mean, for families, for everything else. It's, you know, some of it doesn't happen as much as it need to, even in society. You know, that's a lot of what's going on. People are talking and they feel like nobody's listening. You know, okay, who hears me? And that's, you know, that's what happens on the bandstand a lot of times. I always tell a lot of my students, once you start playing with people, it's people you've never played with before, you're going to find that once they know that you're listening and you hear them, it's going to open up a door. You can, I mean, it always happens. You know, you might be playing with somebody and they just thinking about playing the music, and all of a sudden they play something and you catch it with them, and all of a sudden they look up, oh, we're conversating. You know, so.
I like that word, conversating. and I have found that the more in tune the rhythm section is, the easier it is to play, or the less hard. You're not feeling like you're trying to drag people with you or something.
Right.
They're just like, becomes a group effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tonight, when you play with three of the four other guys in the band are in their 70s and 80s. Do you go into that situation thinking, I need to change my playing? Or as opposed to when you might be working with your own quintet?
I try to mostly go into situations like I told you. I try to, you know, before I walk out that door, I try to make sure, look, empty my glass, you know, so I can come, you know, with an empty cup and bring something back. When you going to a buffet and you got, you got 2 sandwiches in your bag, you know what I mean? So, I try to make sure I'm open, so I can receive. I can see. You know, it's like a doctor coming in, and before he's even seen you, he's already got a diagnosis. You know what I mean? You don't want to be that, that doctor. You want to be a doctor. You know, somebody just told him. He says, "Oh, wow, it's this." You know, well, you want to go look, and see for yourself, and because it may not be. It may be. That may just be some symptoms, So you want to go get a good idea for yourself. If you already go with things in mind, then it's it's already narrowed, your scope.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to, just like I said, just be open, empty myself, so I can go and see what it is and what I'm working with and where it's going to go. Because then maybe we can take things into some different places.
Mm-hmm. And you've worked with most of these guys before.
Yeah, in different situations. Dick Hyman, we've worked together quite a bit.
Yeah.
Over the years. Jay Linhart and I have been on some gigs together. I think the last time I worked with him, we might have done Dizzy's with George Wein.
With George Wein?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. It was a band that George Wein had.
I see.
I think it might have been one of the last times we worked together.
Uh-huh. You know, I think the last time I went to a club in New York, I think it was the Iridium, and Ron Carter had a group. It was very good, but it was not his group. It was Who Can I Get, I think. You know, everybody played good, but it cost me. This was probably 10 years ago. That cost me, I think, almost $70. By the time I paid the cover and had a couple drinks.
Yeah, it's expensive.
And I'm wondering about two things. Like, how does that kind of thing sustain itself? We're worried about our audience. And also, what are those musicians getting paid?
Well, it depends, and that's what I'm saying. That's one of the difficult things now for jazz is that, and it's not just jazz; it's life. Period. Everything is so expensive, and who's to be blamed? I'm not sure. I mean, we all know somebody's walking away with a bigger cut of the pie, you know, than needs to be, where it makes it unfair. But it's caused everything to go up to the point where, you know, the little people are, you know, getting squeezed out and screaming and complaining. You know, like even these talks about minimum wage. I mean, on the one hand, I mean, the people talking about it's not enough, I can understand that because the cost of living. I always tell my kids, I mean, when I first came to New York, and I've been living over in Jersey for a long time, to get on the PATH train, which was, you know, just to go from, you know, New Jersey to New York, was under $1. You know what I mean? It was under $1. I mean, I think it was like maybe 50 cents or something. Just to go, you know, because it's only, you know, the whole ride to go from, I think, from Jersey to New York is like 20 minutes. So it was under $1. I mean, now it just went up, I think, a couple of days ago. So now it's $2.75 for one trip. You know what I mean? So, but over the years, it's gone up. I think when I first got to New York, to drive and go through the Holland Tunnel was like $2. Whatever, it was under $5. I mean, to go through the Holland Tunnel now, anytime I got to go to work, that means every night to go through that tunnel, I have to spend, the cost right now is $13. You know what I mean?
A toll?
A toll.
Wow.
Yeah. And now they're saying that every year, all of these are going up a certain amount of money. So I was just telling my kids the other day, so that means, look, in another 10 years, to go from New Jersey to New York, by the train, is going to be almost a $5 ride. You know what I mean? So if you just want to go hang out, you're looking at least $10, you know, just to take the train. Now, driving wise, we may be up in 10 years, it may be almost $20 just for the toll. Everything is just,
you know, but this occurs to me, and it seems like one of the things that keeps getting cheaper and cheaper to the point of being ridiculous is buying music.
Well, that's because musicians aren't making any money. I mean, I was just telling, I talked to Jimmy Heath the other day. You know, we were laughing and talking because we were talking about, you know, the cost of things. And I told him, I said, yeah, everything's going up, but what jazz musicians make, the jazz musicians have been making the same amount of money since I came along. I mean, I'm talking to Jimmy Heath, who was like, what, 88 or something? I mean, you know, the jazz musicians, and I said, I've been here at least, you know, 30 years myself. The pay hasn't changed. I mean, the garbage man pay has gone up. You know what I mean? Most of the jazz musicians are still making the same amount of money.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. I have to tell a lot of young guys now, they really have to think about this, because for some of the gigs I used to take, let's say if I was going into New York and I had somebody call me up for a gig. Okay, so if it's a $100 gig, you know, sometimes, you know, I have to think about it, because you got already, just off the bat, you know, you put gas in the car, you spend $13 for the tunnel. If you gotta put your car in a garage, you know, you've already spent half your money, you know, before you do the gig.
Wow.
So that's what, you know, in answer to, you know, what you were saying, sometimes that's why those cover charges now are so high, because, you know, even it's hard for a jazz club even to sustain itself a lot of times, because those rents now, the rents for everybody, you know, leases, it's just terrible. I mean, it's just, what they're asking for is just like, You know, it's like I never thought it was gonna get to be, you know, this expensive.
How old are your kids?
Oh, I got them all ages. I got grandkids now. It's
Uh-huh.
6 grandkids.
Okay.
But I got kids from the oldest. I think is 30. So 30
Okay.
down.
Yeah. If your grandson come to you when he's, let's say, 12, 13 years old, and I want to be a musician, what do you say to?
You know, that's what I'm saying. Over the years, that has changed, and I don't think it's just because I've gotten older, but I think the times have changed. Because when I was coming up, I mean, people still said the same thing to me, but I think it was for a different reason. Because I don't think they saw what this was going to be like now. But even like, you know, a lot of, you know, some of my other family members, if you said you wanted to be a musician or you said you wanted to be an athlete or something, everybody always told you, well, look, have your backup plan. You know, there was always that. Well, when you go to school, you know, major in this. And you know, and my thoughts then were, look, it's not going to be a backup plan. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make it work. You know, I'm going to succeed. I'm not thinking about plan B. Nowadays, I don't know if I could really say that. You know, I wouldn't even tell my kids that because, like I said, it's just so different. The opportunities that were there for me, I don't really see those opportunities right now for aspiring musicians. Like I said, I can't tell somebody, well, if you go to school and you do this, I'm gonna introduce you to such and so, you'll be able to go out and do 4 years with Betty Carter, or you can get with Art Blakey, you know, and they'll take you on tour. And right now, that's not in place.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the universities are graduating a lot more players.
Right.
That are all trying to get.
We're all trying to work. You know, it's a lot more players right now. Probably more players than there is audience, and that's until we work on that aspect of it. Until we find a way to start replenishing the audience. Mm-hmm. It's like anything else. You know, supply and demand. If we can get the demand up, then maybe we'll get some other business owners and other people saying, you know what, I'll open up a spot here. I'm gonna open up a spot here. Or, you know, we're gonna put a club back in here. You know, but right now I've seen too many clubs open up, fall by the wayside. Too many venues are suffering because they're not able to make the kind of money off of doing, you know, promoting jazz music.
Okay. This might be a tough question, but what kind of things make you angry? Either musically or just in life?
I would still say that pretty much the same things as people not being human. You know, and that covers a whole lot. I mean, when you look at you know, be it war, racism, you know, senseless killings, all of it. I mean, because it's hurtful on one side and angers you, you know, on the other side. I mean, hurtful because, I mean, we look at all the technology, you know, that we have nowadays, you know, things that we can do, you know, and talk to somebody from around the world, you know, via the computer or send an instant message. You look at all this wonderful technology and we still can't get along. I mean, that to me is always, you know, mind-boggling. All the things that we've come up with and helped to create, but we can't treat each other, you know, fairly. You know, that you know, so that will always anger me. You know, be it whatever it is. You know, race relations, just not wanting to treat other human beings with the, you know, adequate, you know, due respect. You know, it's always, I think, should anger everybody.
Yeah. Are you a spiritual? Do you think of yourself as a spiritual person?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. And I do believe I always tell a lot of my students, for this music to be approached right and properly, you really have to be. I think the majority of those guys that played the music that I knew were. All those guys that that I named you that I was close, I was close with or I worked with, were. A lot of times they may not have worn it on their sleeves, but when you got to know them, oh, okay, how they conducted themselves. You knew that there was there's something underlying in there that was intact. Billy Taylor, Max Roach. I mean, Billy Higgins, Jackie McLean. I mean, a lot of those guys, Abdul Ibrahim, all those guys that I spent, time with, that had a big influence on me. Betty. I mean, you knew that there was, some things intact. And it had to be for them to be the kind of people that they were. And that was the other beautiful thing about jazz for me too, is the way the musicians were. And I think that's something that's missing in society that we need, is that all of the musicians that I saw, they were so dignified. They were gentlemen.
The Joe Wilders.
Yeah, right. It's just like polished. It's like, as far as they may not have had 2 nickels. You know what I mean? But they were still dignified, and that's what I mean. It was something that was an intent. It was something that they were trying to say. It's like, it was a message in all of that.
Mm-hmm. What's the, again, this is sometimes a hard question. What's the best gig or series of gigs you ever had, and on the other hand, what might have been the worst?
I don't know if I can ever say I've had a worst. And all the gigs I've had have been important and great to me. So I'm still a fan of the music. You know what I mean? Every time I could still get on the bandstand with those guys that I had posted on my wall. I had they had their album covers tacked up, or I had read their interviews. You know what I mean? Just for me to still be around them and have him call me up, I'm like, wow. You know what I mean? Sometimes, like when Max would call me up, I'd be like, wow. I mean, I still remember sitting in that bedroom as a kid hearing my first Max Roach Clifford Brown record. You know what I mean? So I mean, when I could talk to him on the phone, hear him call my name, was like, man, it was being a part of something, being accepted, having a stamp of approval, but at the same time, I had so much respect for them. Like I said, I was a fan of music. Even when sometimes they would call me up for gigs. I mean, I would still light up like for somebody else. Like you was getting a big gift for, Christmas Day or something. It's like, wow, man, okay.
Nice. That's a great sentiment. You just said playing with those guys that were on the wall.
Yeah.
That's great.
I mean, even tonight, because I always think about Dick Hyman. Dick Hyman's in that Charlie Parker video. One of the very few, one of the few videos of Charlie Parker. And he had the chance to sit there with Charlie Parker. Tonight we'll be sitting with him. I mean, I'm a history buff, so all those things are always
and
great for me.
I totally agree. And these, like Bucky. He'll just say something in passing. That thing I did with Paul McCartney recently, or like what? It was so much their day to day. Just they got on this level.
Right.
It was always good.
Yeah, you can't beat it.
Yeah.
Beat it.
Well, is there anything you'd like to wrap up with that I haven't asked you about?
Oh, not that I can think of. I think we covered quite a bit.
Yeah.
Unless there was something else that you wanted to go over. But,
how do you promote your own group? You have help with that, or you pretty much?
I try to borrow help whenever I can get it. Take any help when I can get hold to it.
Yeah.
And I try to do the very best I can. I still get things printed up. Try to do this social media thing, which.
Right.
A lot of times I have to either ask some youngsters or some people that more in tune.
Yeah.
Because still with some of the social media and you know, computer stuff, I'm still. I mean, I probably might not ever. I mean, because when I hear people talk about tweeting and getting on Twitter, I don't know. It's just not. You know, I can't see myself just every day. Hey, I'm here and I'm the. You know.
Has the importance of making recordings changed?
Yes, very few of them, and nowadays for somebody to record you, it's not a whole lot you can do with them. You know, it's not because, and that's the other thing that happened. This hurt quite a bit is that I think the industry wasn't prepared either for where things were going. You know, so you know it's kind of like when we came on the scene in the '80s. We were one of the first bands to start doing CDs. You know what I mean? That format.
Yeah, that was the time, yeah.
You know, that was leaving, you know. So I think when we came on, I think us and Winton and Branford, and then Roy Harborough came a little behind us, but we were some of the first people to our first recording was album, CD, and cassette. You know, so now, you know, all that's changed, but I don't think the industry saw a lot of things were coming, and then for the now with the computer, the digital downloads, and all that stuff, and then one of the first things that hurt them, Tower Records had come in, like in what is that, like late '70s, early '80s, and they killed all of mom and pop stores because they were such a big chain. It's almost like Walmart. Nobody could compete. They couldn't compete, so a lot of your mom and pop stores went out there. Then when Tower fell, nothing really. So, nobody was really prepared for all that. So I think even for record companies and stuff now, a lot of thought has to be given because it's not a whole lot of places to really sell records unless the musicians are selling them off the bandstand,
right?
Themselves. So still doing CDs. This is a little trickier,
It feels like you should.
Oh, you have to hopefully get something, get some airplay, keep your name out there. But the thing is it's almost like you're doing it and everybody almost kind of knows it's, if we sell X amount, we're lucky.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's not going to be a money maker.
Right.
But promotion. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing you tonight and
I'm looking forward to
sharing some music, and thanks for your time today.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it much.
Okay, thanks a lot.